How many of you here today own a cell phone? Raise your hands. How many of you do not own a cell phone? Raise your hands. More than I thought. Do you know the story about the monkey in the jar of peanuts? The monkey puts his hands in the jar and grabs a fistful of peanuts. He doesn't realize that if he only opens his fist and lets go of the peanuts, his hand will come out easily. But then he wouldn't get the peanuts, so he holds on. He never gets to eat the peanuts, and his fist is stuck in the jar forever. The peanuts are cell phones. Most people on this planet have a jar of peanuts with their fist in the jar, and they won't let go. If they think about it at all, they want the cell towers to go away. They don't want 5G. They don't want 20,000 satellites in the sky. They don't want to be irradiated, but they won't take their hand out of that jar. It doesn't occur to them that once, not too long ago, there were no peanuts in the jar, and there were no cell towers, and they did not forget their words, and their friends did not have cancer and heart disease and diabetes, and their children did not have ADHD or autism, and flowers were full of butterflies and bees.
I think probably the worst thing that you can do in an elementary school is have any kind of wireless technology. Putting Wi-Fi into an elementary school just doesn't make any sense to me at all. These are the most sensitive people in our population, and they're going to be adversely affected by chemicals or by anything else in that school environment. So, for example, cancers in children are much more virulent than they are in adults. They develop very rapidly, whereas in adult the cancer is a very slow-growing thing. We think that attention deficit disorder might actually be related to some of these exposures, and there's very limited evidence that autism might also be related to living in a high electromagnetic environment.
Hi, I'm Austin Lamond and I'm 14 years old. I go to Mountain View School. I've been suffering weird headaches and dizziness and displacement. Like, it feels like my head is like there's a lot of pressure in my head and it's like repulsing like this. And I just feel like displaced, and then when I'm not there, nothing happens. So, and like I get really like weak, and like it's hard to hold a pencil too, and I can't think straight.
Starting this year at Mountain View, I've been getting a lot of headaches, and it's been making me really dizzy, and like it feels like I can't concentrate, and you feel like you're not really there. It's hard to explain.
The thing that concerned us was that she always got better when she got home. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. We got her eyes checked and found out that wasn't it. And actually had everything checked and found out that wasn't it. And she's still, to this day, when she goes to class, probably about 4 out of the 5 days that she's there, she's coming home with a headache. And I mean significant headache where she just take Tylenol or Advil.
My children, they are students at Mountain View School, and in the last couple of years I've noticed that my children have had headaches, which concerns me because I don't know many children that do get headaches.
My name is Gigi. Mountain View parents have 2 kids at Mountain View. One is in grade 6, one is SK. My concerns are Georgia used to complain of headaches while in school. So then I decided, okay, take the next step, go to the doctor. So we went and saw the doctor. She interviewed Georgia and asked, if these headaches occurred while in school, at home, and the outcome was they were only occurring while she was at school. They weren't occurring on the weekends, and now being in a portable, nothing, no headaches. So, I mean, what do you say about that? Strange.
As a parent, I wonder, how does it compare to a cell phone tower, for example? We've read these studies that show that living within 300 or 400 meters of a cell phone tower can increase your chance of all kinds of ailments, headaches, dizziness, even cancer and leukemia. What if you measured that? And then what about at our school? Could you measure what the microwaves are at our school where the kids are sitting every day? Even if you measured outside of the windows, right where the kids are sitting in the kindergarten class, could you detect microwaves?
Since I found out about the Wi-Fi and some of the symptoms, it makes me think that we don't know enough, and that maybe we should be cautious, and before it's completely proven safe, I would really choose to hardwire all of our computers, which does the same job that the Wi-Fi does.
About 2 years ago, my son started getting some strange sensations, and it was usually at nighttime. It would last about 10 or 15 minutes.
I had my eyes, everything looked big, and when my mom talked in bed, everything sounded really, really loud.
His bedroom was right over where we kept our computer, I realized later, but he would get really strange sensations at bedtime, and he would call it the weird brain thing. And I'd ask him to describe it to me, and he would describe it as the windows and doors were changing shape, and my voice was getting louder and softer. So his perceptions were quite distorted, and I was worried, and I suspected it was the computer. One day I called the phone company, and I just said I wanted to switch to cable, and it was just a matter of changing the modem. He's never had that weird brain thing again, ever.
The computer was right under me, so it was pretty obvious.
If you or someone you know has diabetes, you need to watch this short video, Diabetes and Electrosensitivity. There are two main types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, which is also called childhood onset, accounts for 5 to 10% of all diabetics and is largely genetic. Type 2 diabetes, also known as adult onset, accounts for 90 to 95% of all diabetes and is attributed largely to lifestyle and obesity. I would like to suggest there is another type of diabetes, type 3 diabetes, which has an environmental trigger that causes blood sugar to spike or fall. One of these triggers is dirty electricity. The information presented in this video is from a peer-reviewed publication. Dirty electricity elevates blood sugar among electrically sensitive diabetics and may explain brittle diabetes. In this document, I present the results from 4 case studies. The first example is a 54-year-old male who was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. What is interesting about this case is that his blood sugar remains normal when he's fishing or out in the woods, but when he's in a built-up area near power lines or working on his computer, his blood sugar increases. As part of this study, case number 1 measured the amount of dirty electricity in his home, shown in blue, and his blood sugar, first thing in the morning, shown in pink, for 9 days. His blood sugar should be at or near the red line. Instead, what we find is that the higher the levels of dirty electricity in his home, the higher his blood sugar. On one of the days, he started working on his computer before he measured his blood sugar, which was higher than normal. He moved away from the computer, waited 10 minutes, and measured his blood sugar again. This time, his blood sugar dropped by 20 milligrams per deciliter, or 1.2 millimoles per liter, in just 10 minutes. This man is electrically sensitive and is a type 3 diabetic. If your blood sugar changes in different environments, you might have type 3 diabetes. Case number 2 is a 57-year-old female with type 2 diabetes. She uses exercise to control her blood sugar, shown here in pink. Her exercise of choice is walking. When she goes for a 20-minute walk at the mall after hours, her blood sugar drops significantly. The gray bar shows her blood sugar before walking and the green bar after a 20-minute walk on day 1, day 2, and day 3. Sometimes she walks on her treadmill. This time her blood sugar increases as shown in blue after a 20-minute workout on day 1, day 2, and day 3. This woman is responding to the dirty electricity generated by her treadmill. She is a type 3 diabetic. If your blood sugar increases when you use electric exercise equipment, you may have type 3 diabetes. The treadmill test may be a good diagnostic for electrosensitivity among diabetics. Doctors need to be made aware of this so they can prescribe appropriate exercise for their patients. Case number 3 is an 80-year-old female with type 1 diabetes who takes insulin twice a day. Like most people, her home has dirty electricity, which was reduced with special filters. She measured her blood sugar first thing in the morning for 1 week before filters were installed, and then for 1 week with filters. The filters significantly reduced the dirty electricity in her home by 98%. Her blood sugar during this period dropped by 33%, and the amount of insulin she required was reduced by 75%. This woman is electrically sensitive. If you reduce your exposure to dirty electricity and require less medication to regulate your blood sugar, you may have type 3 diabetes. The fourth and last case is a 12-year-old male who had elevated blood sugar and was rushed to hospital on December 30th, 2002. His blood sugar was well above acceptable range. This graph shows the amount of insulin he took in blue and his daily blood sugar in pink. While in the hospital, he was given insulin, but his blood sugar continued to climb. On January 1st, his blood sugar began to drop and he was allowed to go home. As he increased his insulin injections and his blood sugar continued to drop, by May 9th, he had reached the acceptable range and his blood sugar was beginning to stabilize at 77 units per day. During this period, he took 12 sugar pills. On January 14th, filters were installed in his home to reduce the dirty electricity. The very next day, his blood sugar began to drop to the lower part of the acceptable range. His parents reduced his insulin injections and his blood sugar stabilized at 37 units of insulin, about half of what he was taking a few days earlier. During this period, he consumed 125 sugar pills. Some doctors will tell you this is normal for those who are first diagnosed with diabetes. They call it the honeymoon period. However, in the same household, a younger sister, who had lived with diabetes since the age of 3 months, also had to make downward adjustments to her insulin when the power quality in their home was improved. This young man and his sister are both electrically sensitive and are both type 1 and type 3 diabetics. Do you have type 3 diabetes? Does your blood sugar increase after using electronic exercise equipment? Does your blood sugar suddenly spike or fall for no obvious reason? Does your blood sugar change in different environments? Do you have difficulty regulating your blood sugar, and has anyone ever told you that you have brittle diabetes? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you have type 3 diabetes. So we may well have 3 types of diabetes, one that is mostly genetic, another controlled by lifestyle, and a third influenced by the environment. What can you do if you have type 3 diabetes? You can test your environment for electromagnetic pollution. You can minimize your exposure to electronic equipment, and you can share this information with your doctor and others who have diabetes. For more information, visit the Electrosensitive Society or magdahavis.com. Please share this information with those who have diabetes and with their doctors. We need to know what the environmental triggers are and what percentage of diabetics react to these triggers. Thank you. I work with people who have multiple sclerosis and learn that their symptoms are exacerbated by poor power quality, also known as dirty electricity. Dirty electricity is generated by various devices in the home, including computers, compact fluorescent light bulbs, plasma TVs, and smart meters. It can also enter the home from neighbors who use these devices or from nearby wind turbines and poorly maintained power lines. Dirty electricity can be measured with a scope meter or a microsurge meter. One gives a waveform, the other gives a number in GS units. Compact fluorescent light bulbs and plasma TVs generate radio frequencies. These waveforms flow into your electrical wiring and corrupt your power supply. This is called dirty electricity. By practicing good electromagnetic hygiene and by reducing exposure to dirty electricity, some people with multiple sclerosis can find relief for their symptoms, as shown in these videos. This is a video of a 27-year-old male diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis 2 years earlier. He normally walks with a cane. Dirty electricity in his home was between 135 and 410 GS units. Ideally, it should be below 40. The video on the left was taken at the beginning of the study. The video on the right was taken 2 weeks later. His symptoms reappear when he spends time away from home. This subject is a 40-year-old female who was diagnosed with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis 13 years earlier. Dirty electricity in her home was high due to a plasma TV. The video on the left was taken at the beginning of the study. The video on the right was taken 6 weeks later. Not everyone we tested improved after filters were installed in their homes. How many people with multiple sclerosis are also electrically hypersensitive? Could electrosmog play a role in relapsing remitting MS? Could the absence of electrosmog delay, halt, or reverse the progression of this disease? What frequencies and devices are they responding to? Symptoms for multiple sclerosis and electrohypersensitivity are similar. These are the symptoms they have in common. We know that electrosmog affects the nervous system, and the nervous system is compromised in patients with multiple sclerosis. We know that electrosmog affects the immune system, and MS is believed to be an autoimmune disease. We know that electrosmog initiates a stress response, and that symptoms of MS worsen with stress. Electrosmog can be an irritant or toxin to those with MS. How many electrically hypersensitive patients are misdiagnosed with MS? Just as some people with multiple sclerosis are sensitive to the weather, some may be sensitive to electrosmog. While there is little we can do about the weather, we can reduce electrosmog in our immediate environment, and we can practice good electromagnetic hygiene. Here are some suggestions.
Elas estão aos montes, espalhadas pela cidade em meio aos prédios e casas. E não é apenas a estrutura física, não. Cada antena emite radiação 24 horas por dia. Um risco para quem trabalha na manutenção das estruturas.
Um pouco preocupa.
Mas não tem outro jeito, né?
Tem outro jeito, tem que trabalhar.
Imagina então a situação de quem tem uma gigante desta como vizinha. Do portão de casa, Sueli avista o perigo. Com muita luta, ela conseguiu a retirada de uma antena que havia sido instalada no lote ao lado do imóvel dela. Agora quer que esta outra, a poucos metros dali, também seja desativada.
A prefeitura sabe o que pode causar isso para os moradores. Eles não tomam conhecimento, porque perto da casa de gente importante não colocam.
A preocupação de Sueli faz sentido. Um estudo feito durante 10 anos e que resultou numa pesquisa de doutorado chegou à conclusão que quem mora num raio de até 500 metros de antenas tem muito mais chances de adquirir vários tipos de câncer.
Esses pontos vermelhinhos aqui são as antenas no município. E essa cruzinha, nós temos aqui os óbitos. Então, nós fizemos o geoprocessamento em toda Belo Horizonte. Que distância essas pessoas que morreram por neoplasias se encontravam das antenas. E a taxa de mortalidade foi maior dentro do raio de até 500 metros das antenas transmissoras.
Não existe uma comprovação específica para cada caso. Coincidência ou não, só num quarteirão do bairro Sagrada Família, pelo menos 5 pessoas tiveram câncer depois que esta antena foi instalada. Seu Nelson teve na próstata.
Eu estou na fase ainda de protocolo de observação, né? Ainda falta algum tempo para poder afirmar com certeza que eu estou curado. Mas 3 pessoas, né, morreram nesse período. E um, que é o dono do próprio local onde foi colocada a antena, mudou daqui. Eu não sei se já faleceu ou se continua vivo, eu espero que sim.
A antena, que está no quarteirão de cima da casa de seu Nelson, foi instalada bem ao lado de uma escola infantil.
As crianças estão vulneráveis, né? São vulneráveis a esse problema. Então, a preocupação dos pais é muito grande.
É por causa dessa preocupação e também para que se faça cumprir a lei que o Ministério Público Estadual está entrando com uma ação na Justiça, exigindo a retirada ou a legalização de praticamente metade das antenas de celulares que estão em funcionamento em Belo Horizonte. Segundo o Ministério Público, mais de 700 estão irregulares.
Nós não estamos nos opondo à tecnologia. O que nós queremos é, primeiramente, que o usuário da telefonia móvel tenha conhecimento dos impactos dessa tecnologia sobre a sua saúde. O Ministério Público vai fazer a responsabilização pessoal das autoridades que tinham que ter desinstalado e que não desinstalaram.
A Prefeitura de Belo Horizonte reconhece que é grande o número de antenas irregulares, como estas duas, que estão a menos de 500 metros uma da outra, e diz que as fiscalizações são constantes.
Todas essas instalações foram fiscalizadas e autuadas, e algumas mais de uma vez ou mais de 2 vezes. Nós já chegamos a fazer 928 autuações, contadas a partir de 2006 somente.
Ainda segundo o gerente de licenciamento e infraestrutura, 66 torres foram retiradas nesse período. Outras 19 devem ser desinstaladas até janeiro. A doutora em campo eletromagnético é enfática e sugere uma mudança na lei, com a criação das chamadas áreas brancas.
Área hospitalar, proibido instalar antena dentro dos 500 metros. Antena dentro de bairros residenciais também devem ser proibidas. É o maior problema ambiental do século XXI, são essas radiações, e nós precisamos agir rápido.
There are an estimated 270 million cell phone users in the United States, about 4 billion worldwide. I would venture to guess that almost everyone in this room uses a cell phone on a regular basis, and most of us don't give a second's thought that it could harm us in any way. However, a growing number of experts think there is cause for concern. Indeed, some international studies have suggested that people who use cell phones for more than 10 years are more likely to get tumors on the side of the head where they usually hold their phone. I hope today's hearing will begin to address that question. Our first witness is Dr. John Bucher, Associate Director of the National Toxicology Program, a cooperative effort between the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the CDCP, and the FDA to coordinate toxicological testing programs in the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Bucher, welcome to the committee, and please proceed.
Thank you. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, there's only been 10 or 12 years of exposure to these agents, and it's increasing dramatically. And there have been some hints recently that there is an increase in brain cancers in people who have used these cellular communication devices for a number of years.
What are the considerations with respect to an additional potential risk for children using cell phones?
Children have a configuration of their skull that does allow penetration of cell phone radiation deeper.
Are you saying there's a potentially greater risk?
I'm saying there potentially is a greater risk. And
what limitations, if any, then, any parents are watching this on C-SPAN, what should they do?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I think
Well, would there be a precautionary approach? How about the use of earphones to minimize risk?
I think that's a good idea.
If they can do this, they would be better to have some kind of device like this.
As I understand it, yes.
Why hasn't there been done so far more been done here in the United States to look at the epidemiology of brain cancer among cell phone users? And why aren't we a part of the interphone collaboration?
Well, Senator, my understanding is that we do. In fact, NCI does support part of the interphone study. The interphone study is a large study in 13 different countries that is supported by or is being coordinated by the World Health Organization.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Dr. Sadetsky.
I'm currently engaged in collaborative studies of brain cancer funded among others by the NIH and the European community. For over 10 years, I have been participating in research on the risk of tumors associated with cell phones, initially as the principal investigator of the Israeli part of the interphone study, the largest collaborative study conducted today on this issue. And currently, I lead the Israeli team of another study, also funded by the EU, on cell phones and children, called MobiKids. In 2008, we published findings from the Israeli finding of the interphone study suggesting a risk of salivary gland, are located right here, salivary gland tumors among people who used cell phones for relatively long periods when phone was usually held on the same side of the head where the tumor developed and when use was relatively heavy. It is my hope that the issue raised in this hearing will encourage you to promote research and take actions to ensure the safe and responsible use of cell phones. I would like to thank Dr. Deborah Davis, who invited me here, and I would like to thank you for your attention and for raising this issue.
Dr. Sadetsky, thank you very much for coming a great distance, and thank you for your testimony. Dr. Davis, you said in your testimony, again, following up on this, is that you said that Interphone has studied people who use phones heavily for a decade, has found that where persons have used phones heavily for a decade or longer, there's evidence of significantly increased risk, literally a doubled risk of malignant brain tumors. The one researcher to have studied young people who began using cell phones as teenagers, Professor Leonard Hardell of Sweden, has found that those who started to use cell phones heavily before age 20 have 4 to 6 times more brain tumors by the time they reach their 30s. Can we get some documentation on that study?
Absolutely. In fact, I want to also tell you, unfortunately, that there has been a history here that I think we need to recognize. When Professor Henry Lai and Singh developed the pioneering new technique for measuring DNA damage called the COMET assay that shows you a tail of DNA when it's damaged, when they developed that assay in 1994, they showed that radiofrequency exposure to brain cells of the rat could be damaging in terms of the COMET assay. The industry response, which has been documented and is in my book as well as other places, was this. First, they went to NIH and tried to get their funding revoked. Then they went to the journal that had accepted the article for publication and tried...
Who they?
The industry working against seeing this work published. Then the same lobbyists tried to get the article unaccepted in a journal where it had been accepted. And finally, they hired other scientists to do advocacy research to try to invalidate the science. And when those scientists actually confirmed the work, it was never published.
What is the strongest evidence you have that exposure to a cell phone causes cancer?
The work that's been done on the COMET assay that shows double-strand breaks in DNA after exposure to cell phone radiation is very strong evidence experimentally. If we tie that with the human studies of Dr. Sadetsky and others that have looked at people who have 10 years of exposure or more, we put that together and we have strong evidence.
Well, Dr. Sadetsky has testified that you see something after 10 years. Is that an accurate statement, Dr. Sadetsky?
Regarding the 10 years, yes. But what worried me was that in my study, I saw consistent positive results, and they always appeared where there is biological plausibility. They did not appear in this group or in that group. They appeared in the more than 10 years. They appeared on the same side where the phone was held. They appeared for the heavy users, and they appeared in rural areas compared to urban areas, and this also has biological plausibility because where antenna is more dense, then the exposure is lower. So the fact that all of these indications appeared where they should have appeared told me that it was a really red light.
Dr. Davis, you said that a cell phone should not be kept any closer than an inch to your body. Is that what you said? I don't know where does that come from?
That actually comes from the BlackBerry manual as well as from the iPhone manual. If you read the manuals, which almost none of us does, that is what they say. So by calling for warning labels as I am simply calling to codify what the industry is currently telling us about cell phones.
Dr. Nedenko? Dr. Nedenko.
Last week, EWG released the results of a 10-month investigation of more than 200 peer-reviewed studies, government advisories, and industry documents on the safety of cell phone radiation. We found that the studies published during the first 2 decades of cell phone use produced conflicting results and few definitive conclusions on cell phone safety. But the latest research, in which scientists are for the first time able to study people who have used cell phones for many years, suggests the potential for serious safety issues. Until the science on cell phone risks is settled, EWG recommends a number of simple actions consumers can take to reduce exposures to cell phone radiation, including use a low radiation phone, use a headset or a speakerphone, choose texting over talking, and limit children's cell phone use. In conclusion, EWG strongly believes that the government should support additional research into this important health question, and that the public has a right to know what levels of radiation they may be exposed to, what may be the potential risks, and what precautionary measures consumers can take to protect themselves and their families from any adverse health effects of cell phone radiation. Thank you for your time.
Did you have something you wanted to add to that, Dr. Sadetsky? I didn't know. I thought you were signaling me. Did you want to?
Just 2 minor points. The first is that in Israel, it is obligatory by law to have the specific absorption rate on every phone that is in the market.
You're doing that now? Or
yes, already for 4 years now.
Senator Spector, I think you want to add before we...
Well, I have a final comment. See what the Senate can do on a Monday afternoon if a couple of senators are in town.
Okay, the reason we're told not to hold a cell phone next to our head is because it's constantly emitting microwave radiation. And as you move it away, you can see the level goes down. And this is what microwave radio frequency radiation sounds like coming from a cell phone antenna. If you live within a few hundred meters of these cell phone antennas, you are exposed to constant microwave radio frequency radiation. And this is 11,000 microwatts per meter squared.
You hold a cell phone in your hand against your head. Your brain is getting 100,000 times more radiation from the cell phone than it probably gets from the nearest cell tower. If you put the cell tower on a table 3 feet away, you're only getting 10 times more radiation from the cell tower than you're getting from from the cell phone than you're getting from the cell tower. In order for you to own a cell phone, that tower has to be there. In order for you to make a cell phone call, that tower has to open up a dedicated channel just for you. And it has to irradiate the entire countryside just so you can make that call and irradiate not only your own brain, but everyone around you. Those of you who own cell phones, do you ever wonder when you're on your phone who you are irradiating, who you are torturing? In order for you to answer a call on your phone, that cell tower has to open up a dedicated channel just for you and irradiate the countryside and all the people and birds and animals and trees and insects just so you can answer that call. And if you want to be able to use your cell phone in emergencies and remote locations, there have to be cell towers absolutely everywhere. And if you want to be able to connect to the internet with your cell phone, and everybody in the world wants to connect to the internet with their cell phone, the existing towers don't have enough capacity, so they have to build more of them. The more devices there are in the internet, the more towers. As we progress from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, we also progress from having a cell tower on a mountaintop 90 miles away to having a cell tower on a lamppost outside your bedroom window. 1G is what we had in the 1980s and until 1996. The phones were large, not many people had them, and the cell towers were few and very far between, mostly around metropolitan areas. The few people who used cell phones lost many brain cells, and some got brain cancer. But the general population was not much affected. Analog signals are smooth sine waves, continuous waves. Each frequency can only serve a single cell phone user. 2G is digital. Digital means pulsed. Everything is encoded into zeros and ones. 2G came to the US in late 1996. The telecommunications industry wanted to put a cell phone into the hands of every man, woman, and child on Earth. And in order to do that, they needed a much denser network of cell towers. And they needed them everywhere, not just in metropolitan areas, but in small towns, forests, wildlife refuges, wilderness areas, and national parks. They sold these phones as being necessary for emergencies, and they could not sell them unless they could assure people they would work wherever they lived and wherever they traveled. 2G was digital for two reasons. First, each frequency could be used simultaneously by many users. They could divide a single frequency into time slots, one time slot per user instead of one frequency per user. Or they could assign a different digital code to different users of the same frequency. So they didn't need quite so many towers if they were digital. Second, they wanted all cell phones to be able to save and store information that could be downloaded onto a computer. 2G caused enormous health problems. It injured millions. It caused the influenza epidemic of 1996 through 1997. It killed at least 10,000 in the United States in a matter of months, according to statistics from the Centers for Disease Control. I am a refugee from 2G technology. Some people say that pulsed signals are more harmful than continuous waves. That's not always true. They both cause cancer and diabetes, as far as we know, equally. Continuous waves cause worse damage to the blood-brain barrier than pulsed signals. Pulse signals are more damaging to the heart and the nervous system, It depends on which effects you are looking at. 3G came to the US in 2004. 3G were the first smartphones. Now you could send text messages and you could get onto the internet with your phone. Cell phones were now little computers. 3G needed a lot more towers. 4G added still more capabilities. It was much faster. You could stream video on your phone. 4G needed to be much faster because 3G was slowing way down due to the constantly increasing traffic and the increasing number of users. 4G required still more towers. Each upgrade in service injured additional people, killed additional people, and created additional refugees who can no longer live in society. 5G will still be digital, but it will be radically different in a number of ways. Necessarily so, because there is no way to connect 1 trillion separate objects to the internet, which is what the Internet of Things is all about. There is no way to do that with traditional cell towers and with the frequencies currently in use. There simply is not enough bandwidth. If you understand that bandwidth means radiation, then you can begin to grasp the enormity of 5G. At millimeter wave frequencies, a wireless company will be able to own 5 gigahertz of continuous electromagnetic spectrum. But even that much spectrum, even that much radiation cannot connect 1 trillion separate devices unless cell towers and cell phones are completely redesigned. 5G is being created because of consumer demand. Too many devices are being connected up to the internet, devices in homes, businesses, and automobiles. Everyone is using their devices at all hours of the day. 4G is slowing way down, and the wireless industry is projecting into the future and building a robust network that will accommodate 100 billion devices, or even 1 trillion devices, all operating simultaneously. The new network will use something called phased arrays. That means your cell phone will have within it an array of dozens of antennas, all working together to shoot a powerful laser-like beam at the nearest cell tower. And instead of having 3, 6, or 9 antennas broadcasting in all directions, the cell tower will have an array of hundreds or thousands of millimeter-sized antennas, all working together to shoot multiple individual laser-like beams at you and everyone else who is holding a cell phone, and the beams, which will have an effective radiated power of up to 100,000 watts or more, will track you wherever you go. Needless to say, birds that get in the way of these beams will be in trouble. So will insects, which are millimeter-sized creatures that will resonate and selectively absorb the millimeter frequencies that will be used for 5G. At least 20 million people in the world, and I estimate that conservatively, have already been injured by cell phones and their infrastructure so severely that they cannot work, they are driven out of their homes and their cities, and they cannot live in society. They are environmental refugees, and they are in every country. Many are housebound and never venture outside. It's not just because of cell towers and Wi-Fi, it's because every person in the world has a cell phone. They never go out in society to avoid being tortured whenever someone pulls out a phone and makes a call, or sends a text, or takes a picture, or even sits near them with a phone in their pocket, because cell phones radiate even when they are off, as long as the battery is in them. Many of these people are homeless, living in cars and tents in remote places, committing suicide, and no one comes to their aid. Many are your friends and neighbors, your doctors, your children's teachers. Many more are your former friends and neighbors, your former doctors, your children's former teachers, perhaps your ex-spouse, your mother or father or son or daughter or cousin. These are the people who are called, wrongly, electrically sensitive, just as the people who have been poisoned by the millions of petrochemicals that have rained down on our world since World War II are called, wrongly, chemically sensitive. Electrical sensitivity is not a disease. It is not a medical term. It is a purely political term. It is a term that allows everyone who uses a cell phone or a wireless computer to pretend that these devices are not poisoning them, and that the people who have woken up to the truth, who have not only woken up to the truth, but who dare to speak the truth, it is a term that allows everyone who is still in denial to pretend that such people are abnormal and less than human. It is a term that allows the purveyors of these devices to sell them with a clear conscience, to pretend that they are not committing a crime against all humanity. It is a term that allows people to pretend that their own poor memory and inability to sleep, or their high blood pressure, or their multiple sclerosis have nothing to do with their own cell phone and their wireless router. It is a term that allows the screams of the people who have not only managed to figure out what is killing them, but who dare to insist that this is not okay, that this is not normal, that this must stop. It is a term that allows their screams on behalf of themselves and their beautiful planet to be ignored. It is a term that allows everyone who has opened up their eyes to what is actually happening to be treated as though they are still blind instead of being listened to. It is a term that allows doctors to prescribe anti-anxiety medications, antidepressants, and sleeping pills instead of telling their patients to get rid of their Wi-Fi and throw away their cell phones. It is a term that allows people to undergo hip replacements instead of keeping their cell phone out of their pocket, to undergo heart transplants instead of throwing away their wireless devices. Because of cell phones, the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet is occurring right now and for the past 20 years in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There is a rare earth mineral in your cell phone called tantalum that is extracted from an ore called coltan. The vast majority of the world's coltan is located in eastern Congo. A lot of that coltan is being mined by hand by child slaves in the Ituri province of the Congo, where the rainforest is being cleared. The eastern lowland gorilla, which is the world's largest gorilla subspecies, is being driven to extinction. Ethnic cleansing is wiping out all the villages of that province. The Mbuti pygmies, who used to inhabit the Ituri rainforest that used to exist, are being slaughtered, all to clear an immense area of land in order to mine more and more and more and more coltan for the billions of throwaway devices that you are holding in your hands that become obsolete and must be replaced virtually every year. An estimated 2 million people in eastern Congo, many of them children, many of them virtual or actual slaves, are mining coltan by hand under appalling conditions to be shipped to processing plants in China and East Asia before winding up in your cell phone.
This is one of the thousands of unregulated, unmonitored mines in the DRC. It's crawling with children, working like modern-day slaves. A 12-hour-long day of punishing work may earn them the equivalent of £1. Although one of the poorest countries on earth, DRC is rich in minerals. But a history of brutal colonial exploitation looks like being repeated now in 2017. Much of it's mined by hand with rudimentary tools in harsh, potentially hazardous conditions. And wretched weather or not, the rush is on for a mineral the DRC has in great abundance, cobalt, and it's fast becoming more precious than gold. It's a critical ingredient in lithium-ion batteries which power smartphones and laptops. An army of children are at the heart of the mining production. Wearing no shoes and in the most wretched conditions, Dorsan is ordered to retrieve the sack he's forgotten. There's an urgency now. The rains make this dangerous work even more risky, and Dorsan's told in no uncertain terms he risks a beating if he messes up again. Dorsan, with Richard beside him, have worked all day. They're 8 and 11 years old. Even this punishing work doesn't guarantee enough for food. Dorsan hasn't eaten for 2 days now. This is what helpless looks like, and he's one of the children making millions for multinational corporations in America and China whilst they suffer in squalor. For this, they'll get maybe 8 British pence a day. The tunnels are dug by hand with no supports. They frequently collapse, especially during rain. The miners climb down using holes carved in the rock and no safety equipment. This most precious of minerals is often extracted and sorted by tiny hands. They don't wear gloves or masks, yet the World Health Organization says exposure to cobalt and breathing in its dust fumes can cause long-term health problems. We visited 5 different mines across the south of DRC and found all use child workers. Monica's the youngest worker in this group at just 4. But even those barely able to walk have lost their childhoods to mining. Natalie's 12 years old. My fingers hurt, she tells us. Miles away on a different site, Makumba Mateba shows us the cobalt tunnel he's dug with 3 of his friends. It's physically tough work. They removed all this rock by hand over nearly 4 months.
It's incredibly insecure for them. Although this is really rich in minerals and it's going down just 15 metres, there's no support bars, they have no protective masks or protective equipment at all. And right at the bottom I can see water.
It's his village's water which Makumba's convinced has caused his health problems. After a lifetime of drinking it, he has a huge tumour on his throat.
Quand on est en train de travailler à Kitowe, là on cultive la tomate, en train de cultiver, si j'ai soif, je pars puiser de l'eau.
There are countless reports of other health problems from those living nearby and working on the mines.
On trouve les infections, minimum infection, je retourne à Onako. Kasi mama anatumika makariere sana, tazama mtoto na infection shulungula, mwingine kuna bima buton, mwingine ndio tunaona ndo makozi linatoka mama mimba nenda makariere.
These twins are just 2 days old, and although small, so far they're healthy, to the relief of their mother.
Hii manini maminere ishi unaleta maproblem kama wewe mwanamke unaenda kutumika huko. Inaleta maproblem na difficulty kama una mimba. Bo shi mwanamke ni mama yangu kunetupeleka kukwesa mama yangu kunetupeleka tunaenda kutumika.
But even if they stay healthy, the twins face a lifetime of hard labour as soon as they can walk. The children's cobalt is sold cheaply to mostly Chinese traders who we film secretly. They don't ask questions about where their cobalt comes from or who's worked to extract it. They just want the best price.
The black part is cobalt.
Even those who aren't Chinese, this trading market has Indian owners, told us they sell onto the dominant Chinese exporter of cobalt, CDM. The cobalt first mined here is then sold again to the Chinese parent company, which then supplies some of the world's biggest battery makers. And those batteries with ingredients which originated in DRC end up in, for instance, smartphones. It's an intricate supply chain which allows easy deniability for the multinationals making huge profits. An investigation last year by Amnesty found similar human rights abuses. Nothing appears to have changed.
The local traders sell most of the cobalt to a company called Congo Dongfang Mining, or CDM. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of one of China's largest mineral product manufacturers, Haiyou Cobalt. CDM has its own smelting operation, which processes the ore before exporting it to its parent company in China. Haiyou Cobalt sells its products to component firms in China and South Korea. Those companies sell their products to other battery manufacturers, with the final product, lithium-ion batteries, sold to household names in Japan, Europe and the USA, like Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, Sony and Volkswagen.
We believe that companies have a responsibility to ensure that they aren't in any way profiting from human rights abuses.
Responding to Amnesty's allegations, Haiyou Cobalt said,
"Our company has not been aware that any of our legitimate suppliers has hired child labour in their mining sites or operated in unsafe working conditions. CDM has rigorously selected its ore suppliers to ensure the procurement of raw materials through legitimate channels."
LG Chem, one of the world's largest battery manufacturers, confirmed it acquired component metals through this supply chain and says it's now taking active steps to investigate Amnesty's findings. LG Chem supplies Apple with batteries.
Tapping, swiping and pinching have forever changed the way we navigate and experience our digital world.
And the technological giant only commented to us by addressing the broader question of due diligence, saying it was
currently evaluating dozens of different materials, including cobalt, in order to identify labour and environmental risks, as well as opportunities for Apple to bring about effective, scalable and sustainable change.
Sony said,
"We take this issue seriously and have been conducting a fact-finding process. So far, we could not find obvious results that our products contain the cobalt originated from Katanga in the DRC."
Volkswagen said,
"To the best of our knowledge, the cobalt in our batteries does not originate from the DRC.
Samsung said it had no direct links to CDM or Haiyou Cobalt, adding,
"It is impossible for us to determine whether the cobalt supplied to Samsung SDI came from the DRC Katanga's mines."
Microsoft said,
"We have not traced the cobalt used in Microsoft products through our supply chain to the smelter level due to the complexity and resources required."
The simple answer is that if Amnesty International can do it, they can do it.
Bukavu, provincial capital of South Kivu. In the yard of the Geological Museum, the Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources from Hanover has established a laboratory which can determine the origin of ores. Every sediment has specific characteristics that indicate where the material is from, even when it has been transported across borders, legally or by smugglers. The geological fingerprint is a way to identify dirty minerals. But as an exporter in Bukavu explains, control measures tend to decrease the profitability of a mine like Fungamwaka. The prices on the world market stay the same. All the costs, taxes, fees, have to be carried by the mine workers. That is why Miserio and other European development organizations are demanding action from the European Union. They want to see ambitious legislation that will break the links between natural resources and conflict. Businesses that operate on the European market and sell products containing conflict minerals should be held accountable for their supply chain. They should ensure that human rights standards are respected throughout, from the raw materials to the finished product. And they should cover the cost of this. In Fungamwaka, it's only the miners who pay for the controls. They earn less. I couldn't send a single franc to my family in the last few months. I also can't go home. I would be arrested immediately because of my debts."
Amnesty is now calling on Apple and other giant technology companies to properly investigate the original source of the cobalt in their products. If it is sourced from the DRC, they, and the DRC government should ensure that children are removed from the mines and working conditions for everyone else are made safer.
Most of these child miners will never own a smartphone. They barely survive from day to day. And many other children like Dorsan will be back again tomorrow, digging out one of the most sought-after minerals of our time for a pittance. Alex Crawford, Sky News in the DRC.
The conflict in Congo is being called a civil war by the media. It is not. It is a war for control over the world's most prized mineral deposits. An estimated 5.4 million people died in the first decade of the war over coltan. No one knows how many have died in the second decade. The cause of all of this havoc and destruction is the cell phone. If you want instant communication and information at your fingertips at all times, you're going to destroy the earth. As soon as you buy a cell phone and register it with a service provider, that provider is required by law to put up enough towers to serve you wherever you live and wherever you travel. The more often you go on the internet and the more devices you own that go on the internet, the more towers your service provider has to erect until it eventually runs out of spectrum and has to go to the FCC and ask for more spectrum in order to serve you. And as soon as the FCC auctions off new spectrum, the companies that buy the new spectrum are required by law to put up enough towers and antennas to make use of it. And that is where we are today. The FCC plans to auction off millimeter wave spectrum on November 14th, 2018. And in order to make use of that millimeter wave spectrum, your service provider will have to put up antennas on a pole outside your bedroom window. 5G is just an intensification of the destruction that has been going on for 22 years. The microwave devices that you carry in your hands will be much more powerful. The antennas in the streets and in your children's playgrounds and in the steeples of your churches will multiply tenfold, 100-fold. The birds and insects of this world will be replaced by laser-like beams whizzing by at all times. Instead of every second man and every third woman developing cancer, we will all develop cancer. We will all develop diabetes. Contrary to what some people are saying, the solution is not fiber optic cable. Many people would like to think that if we only connected up every house and every business in the world to fiber optic cable, we could all have super fast internet without wireless. What people do not know is that the wireless industry itself is right now spending $150 billion laying fiber optic cable absolutely everywhere on the planet. It is the only way they are going to have fast enough speeds for 5G. They have to shoot lasers all over the planet through fiber optic cable in order to shoot laser-like beams all over the planet through the air. Once high-speed fiber optic trunks are laid everywhere, they're going to stick millions of antennas into that cable and broadcast 5G. They want to tear out all existing copper wire, all existing coaxial cable, and all the old lower-speed fiber optic cable and replace it all with super high-speed fiber optic trunks that they can stick antennas into. If you advocate for high-speed fiber, you're advocating for 5G. Some people are saying Wi-Fi will be the solution. Instead of dangerous microwaves, we can use safe, ordinary light. I have news for them. Wi-Fi will be worse. It will not be ordinary light. It will be digital, pulsed light, pulsed at the same frequencies that are destroying our world. They are brainwave frequencies. They are frequencies of nervous impulses. They are frequencies of our organs and our cells. and we will absorb them much more efficiently if the carrier wave is light than if the carrier wave is microwaves. We did not evolve with microwaves. Microwaves are foreign to us. Our bodies reject them. Light, however, is a necessary nutrient. The blood in our veins is blue, and in our arteries is red because we absorb red and blue light, as well as the colors in between. Li-Fi will destroy us from within like a Trojan horse. So far, I have only been talking about what's happening on the ground. The third generation partnership project released, that's a worldwide organization that sets the standard for all wireless technology. It released technical specifications for 5G in June 2018. They include not only specifications for 5G on the ground, but specifications for 5G satellites in space. And the fleets of 5G satellites will be enormous. The FCC and the International Telecommunication Union have already approved some of these projects. A company called Worldview is preparing to launch a fleet of 4,540 satellites into low and medium orbit around the Earth in order to provide high-speed, low-latency internet to every square inch of the planet. The partners and investors and customers of this project already include Airbus, Amazon, Virgin Galactic, Qualcomm, Hughes Network Systems, Intelsat of Luxembourg, Marker LLC of Israel, Grupo Salinas of Mexico, SoftBank of Japan, Bharti Enterprises of India, Coca-Cola, and Honeywell. Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, is preparing to launch 12,000 satellites into low orbit to do the same thing. Each satellite will have thousands of millimeter-sized antennas on board, all arranged in a phased array, all working together to focus narrow beams of energy at the ground all over the planet. Each beam from each satellite will have an effective radiated power of up to 5 million watts. Boeing already has permission to launch 2,956 such satellites into low orbit. Nobody is stopping to ask what this will do to Earth and every living thing on Earth. I'm not even talking about the effects of rocket exhaust from thousands of rocket launches on the ozone layer and on the Earth's climate, which will be significant and perhaps catastrophic. I'm talking about the alteration of the electromagnetic environment of the entire planet. What effect will 20,000 satellites, each one emitting beams as powerful as 5 million watts, into the Earth's magnetosphere, what effect will that have on life on the surface of our fragile planet? I have been monitoring the effects of low-orbit communication satellites ever since the first ones began service in 1998. On September 23, 1998, the 66 satellites launched into low orbit by the Iridium Corporation began commercial service to the world's first satellite phones. People from all over the world reported to me that beginning early in the morning on September 23rd, it felt like a knife went through the back of their head, or they had stabbing pains in their chest, or they had sudden onset of headaches, dizziness, nausea, nosebleeds, asthma attacks. That was 66 satellites. What will 20,000 do? Electromagnetic energy is invisible, so people ignore it. But it is all around us, and in us, and through us, and it is the basis of life. The atmospheric electric field, the electric field in which we all live and work and function, has an average value of 130 volts per meter. There is a small but constant electric current coming down from the sky into the earth at all times that flows through every living thing. That electric current enters the top of every tree, flows down through the sap and into the earth through the roots. That electric current enters the tops of our heads, flows down through our acupuncture meridians, and into the earth through the soles of our feet. It is what gives us life, maintains our health, and regulates our biological rhythms. That current is part of the global electrical circuit that atmospheric physicists study. The electric current courses through the ionosphere above us, flows gently down through the atmosphere to the earth in fair weather, courses through the earth beneath our feet, and flows violently back up to the sky during thunderstorms. We pollute the global electrical circuit at our peril. Nobody is stopping to ask what 20,000 satellites located directly in the ionosphere, each one emitting digital pulsed millimeter wave radiation of up to 5 million watts. Nobody is stopping to ask what that will do to every living thing below. We are working on these problems, and by we, I mean I and cooperation with other people throughout the world, and in New Mexico, and in the United States. We're working on these problems at the national and international levels. Here in New Mexico, we are going to file a lawsuit in Santa Fe shortly, asking a judge to declare that any law passed by city, state, or federal government that deprives injured people of any remedy for their injuries, we're going to ask the court to declare such laws unconstitutional. That includes, specifically, an ordinance that was passed by the Santa Fe City Council 1 year ago, which says that antennas in the public rights of way within the city of Santa Fe are no longer subject to land use review. A law that was signed by Governor Martinez in March and is scheduled to go into effect on September 1st, which says that antennas in the public rights of way anywhere in New Mexico are no longer subject to land use review. And we're going to challenge Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which for the past 22 years has deprived injured people of any right to protest cell towers on the basis of health or to collect any damages if they are injured. This lawsuit has the potential for setting a nationwide precedent in a short amount of time, provided we raise enough money to pay for experts and lawyers. Please contact me afterwards, or call me, or email me if you want to help. We have a lawyer who gets how huge this lawsuit is, who is drafting the complaint right now, and who wants to file it by the end of August. An international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space has been drafted and will be released hopefully this week. I have been helping with that effort. Our goal is to get thousands of signatures of scientists, doctors, and environmental organizations all over the world, and to formally present the appeal in many languages to the governments of all nations by the end of September 2018. Also contact me afterwards, or call me, or email me later if you want to help with that project. My phone number and email address are on the handouts that I will give you. All of these efforts, our efforts here in New Mexico, lobbying efforts in Congress and in state legislatures around the country, class action lawsuits that are being filed in Canada and Australia, and the international appeal that we will present to every government. All of these efforts depend on the public. The telecommunications industry is the largest industry on the planet. No legislator, no judge, and no government official will risk damaging this industry and threatening the world economy unless the public rises up and lets them know that we do not want these products and services anymore. None of these efforts can succeed unless the monkey opens his fist. If you want to save yourselves and your neighbors and your children and all the birds and the bees and the butterflies and the frogs and the bats and the trees and the lowland gorillas and the pygmies and the villagers of Ituri province in the Congo, you have to throw away your cell phone. There is no more time for excuses. It has to start here, and it has to start now, and it has to spread from here throughout the world. I am distributing 3 articles that go into more detail about some of the things I have been talking about today. Let me pause for a minute and I'll give you the 3 handouts and you can pass them out. Thank you for the help. The first handout is cell phones, questions and answers, and is all about your cell phone. The second is titled From Blankets to Bullets and is all about 5G. The third is titled Planetary Emergency and is about 5G from space. I also have for sale I brought 16 copies of my book, The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life, which people can buy from me afterwards. It can also be ordered on my website, cellphonetaskforce.org. This book puts everything I have been saying into context and explains how we came to be in the fix that we are in today. It is a story that begins in the year 1746. Chapter 5 is about chronic electrical illness, otherwise known as anxiety disorder. Chapters 7 and 8 are about acute electrical illness, otherwise known as influenza. Chapter 11 is about heart disease. Chapter 12 is about diabetes. Chapter 13 is about cancer. Chapter 16 is about the birds and the bees and the forests. All of the proceeds from sales of my book are being spent on the effort to stop 5G. I will now stop and invite questions.